If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it.
Here at Top Shot Yoda tweets, what do you think RJ's ceiling is? Is it crazy to think it could be Jaylen Brown? And what parts of his game could he unlock to get there? So I'll give it to you first on that one, Tommy. What do you see RJ's ceiling in? If it is fairly high, what does he have to do to get to that point?
Yeah, I would say Jaylen Brown's probably too high. You're talking, Jaylen Brown's a consistent all-star at this stage of the game.
Mm-hmm.
He's only a few years older than Barrett. I think obviously the key with RJ is, on the offensive side of the ball is to become more efficient. Again, over the last 2 seasons, he's one of only 2 players to average more than 16 field goals per game and have an effective field goal percentage below 48%. He's been one of the least efficient shooters, high volume shooters in the NBA over the past 3 years and basically since he entered the league. And again, part of that is as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old kid, but the more concerning data is of late, of these last 2 years in particular. On the flip side of the coin, we saw the second half of last season, the final, basically 7 weeks of the year after the All-Star break, averaged close to 24, 5, and 5, shooting above 40% from 3. We just have these wild swings where RJ will look like Jaylen Brown one night and then look like, an aging Evan Fournier for 3 weeks in a row. So, and especially defensively, those are things, those are kind of effort plays. If you're looking to buy, if you're looking to look at the bright side of RJ, professionalism, he's going to come, he's going to work hard. He's always said and done the right things. As a teenager, drafted to the Knicks with a number 3 pick, a lot of pressure, never let that get to him. Has approached the game the right way, never made headlines for the wrong reasons off the floor, which isn't easy to do in New York. So there's a lot to like there in terms of the character and the kid, but we need to see it translate onto the floor.
Yeah, I think when it comes to RJ's ceiling, I would probably place it somewhere along the lines, because I think the best way to think about it is, what is he on a championship team or a championship caliber team even? So I would say earlier this year when we started this podcast, I said I think he could be a number 2. I'm leaning more towards probably a number 3, which isn't terrible. I mean, Andrew Wiggins was a number 3 on a championship team. He went the All-Star game last year and had a great season. So I think that's probably closer to his ceiling. There's maybe with the caveat, if your number 1 is Giannis, could be number 2, maybe. I think, to me, though, in terms of him getting to that ceiling, and I talked about it, I think on one of the last podcasts we recorded, I think RJ needs to get in better shape. Like I'm going to stay on that tune. I'm not saying that he's out of shape. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying the physical conditioning needed to be the two-way monster that we think RJ has shown the capability to be. When I look at those guys, I look at their conditioning, and I mentioned Jaylen Brown when I last had this conversation. Jaylen Brown, Jimmy Butler, guys of that nature. Those guys can play hard every single possession. Those guys don't take possessions off. Those guys, if you watch them play, they don't ever look tired. It's incredible. And when I watch RJ play sometimes, especially defensively, it's not just looks like he doesn't have his legs. And I think that comes from continuing to mature in his body. I think that comes from overall improving his conditioning. So I would say this offseason, next few off seasons, and I'm hoping Tibbs does this, as I said on one of our last shows, he needs to be challenged. He needs to come in the best physical conditioning of his life. He's entering the prime of his career. So that would be my challenge to RJ. I think that's what would get him. There are things about his offensive game that he can improve. I think that he should. He kind of abandoned the mid-range jump shot. He actually got pretty good at that during his second year. I'd like to see him get back to hitting that mid-range jumper. I think that there's certainly some moves maybe he could even improve in the post, considering he gets a lot of mismatches. I think that he should be able to punish smaller guards even more than he does. But I think the first part is come in next season in the best shape of your life, and then we can kind of figure out the actual game, parts of your game that we need to fix. I think that there's stuff there we've seen. He's still a 22-year-old averaging 19 points in the NBA, so it's not like he's somebody that's some bum. He has a decent platform here. I just need him to see what is that. What do you look like if you're in the best shape of your life? That's what I want to ask for RJ Barrett. So that'd be my question to him.
Yeah, I think the thing you like about RJ is his relatively high floor. He's not gonna.
Exactly.
Becomes a little more efficient. He's going to be, he's going to do enough to contribute to winning basketball. You hope.
Yeah, exactly. And now here's another question on RJ. This from TV critic and film critic for Rolling Stone, Adam Siepenwall, who tweets, Do you think the rest of the league recognizes that RJ is kind of bad at most things on a basketball court, or at least that when his shot is falling off, he's really bad? Or do you think he have real trade value this summer? I'm not sure about all those stuff about him being so terrible, but the part of the question I liked about was the trade value aspect for RJ Barrett, and would he have a lot of value? I think he still does. I think that because he's young. Again, he's 22 years old. I think he'll turn 23 in June. Um, he has a lot of these compiler stats that when you talk about what he's done throughout his career, a lot of guys his age have not done that. I think he has a pedigree that I think a lot of teams will respect. And look, we'll see what happens in the playoffs, but like I think that Knicks will be able to sell the team. Hey, this is a guy who was a clear third option on a team that did X in the regular season and did X in the playoffs. Just like they could sell in the second season. He was the second best player on a team that got the fourth seed. Like I think there are certain things about RJ Barrett's career, what he's accomplished, that I don't think he'd have no value. Do I think that he could be the centerpiece for a trade that gets you a top 10 player? No. But could he be a centerpiece for a trade that gets you a top 30 player? Yeah, I think he could. You probably throw in a couple of picks to include there, but I think that his contract isn't terrible. He's not signed some crazy super max deal. He has a reasonable contract. He's still really young, and he has all of the makings of a guy who wants to be great. So I think that the right team that is offloading a star that is not winning somewhere could absolutely say, give us RJ and give us some draft capital and we'll talk. So I think his trade value is still pretty decent, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think yes, I think he does maintain trade value. Again, you mentioned the counting stats. One of the reasons Knicks fans were so high on him coming into this season was his production in those counting stats. He's one of only five players in NBA history with more than 3,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, 5,000 assists, and 200 3-pointers before turning 22. The other four players in this club: LeBron, Doncic, KD, and Kobe Bryant. So in terms of statistical production, early in his career, RJ's right near the very top. But again, you talk about then on the flip side of the coin, you talk about the inefficiency. There are 49 players averaging at least 16 shots per game this season. Barrett is one of only two shooting below 45% from the floor, below 35% from downtown, and below 75% from the free throw line. So when you have a guy with the usage rate that high, who takes that usage rate is the number of possessions that end in either a field goal attempt or a turnover. And again, Barrett's near in the top I think 75% in the league in terms of usage rate. When you have a guy that's that high, when you combine that high usage rate with that low efficiency, that's how you hurt your team. And the numbers reflect this. Last let me see, I have the data written down here. Last 12 games before the All-Star break, the Knicks were outscored by 83 points with Barrett on the floor. So that's a minus 83, plus minus in contrast. In that same stretch of games, Emmanuel Quickley was plus 42. Kind of circling back to our other conversations. So when you factor in, and again, RJ spent a lot of that time on the floor alongside Randall and Brunson. So in terms of winning basketball, Barrett's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. But again, you factor in the age, the potential ceiling there. All it takes is one GM to believe we can unlock. We've seen flashes. Again, we saw the second half of last season. A guy that was 22 years old, 21 and a half years old, averaging 24, 5, and 5 for a solid 6-week stretch, for a 20-game stretch. Those guys don't come along very often. So I think in the rights, again, for a rebuilding team, for a team, potentially that, feels that, he would slot in perfectly as like kind of the third banana, then I think their teams would be interested. But I think his value has decreased, in the past 6 months. So that's obviously of concern. We'll see how he closes out the season. We'll see how he performs if and when the Knicks advance to the playoffs, and all those things will factor into his value, in July of 2023. And the other thing to keep in mind here is why I think it's a very relevant question is when Josh Hart, when he makes his decision whether he's going to be a long-term piece of the Knicks going forward, that could further the talks and make RJ even more. I don't want to say the Knicks. Certainly, the Knicks aren't going to give him away. He's a player they drafted. They committed to him with a long-term contract. A few months ago, he's certainly part of their plans going forward. But the arrival of Hart, is it makes it at least more feasible for them to potentially part ways with Barrett.
Yeah, it will be definitely an interesting thing to follow. It feels like when you look at the team, and I'll admit Tommy was maybe the first person on this as the team developed this season. You looked at the picture and said, all right, there's a guy here who maybe doesn't fit, and the Knicks are building towards something that's good. It feels like it's Barrett. And I'm as big a Barrett fan as anybody, but it's I think it's undeniable to see it that way right now. I don't know who this is, so forgive me. Someone posted it on Twitter. It was shout out to them who did it. Last year, after Julius Randle signed his contract and had that miserable season last season, it was Clyde Frazier, I think, who came out and was like, Julius is going to have a bounce back year. He needs to understand what it takes to be a leader, what it takes, the pressure that comes with that contract, and next year he'll come in the right shape and the right mind, and he'll play great. And he's been outstanding. I'm hoping Clyde can do the same thing for RJ Barrett. I mean, at the end of this season, I know a couple weeks ago he said that he was the worst defender on the team. And apparently that had got back to RJ. And I think it was Ian Bailey who mentioned that RJ got wind of that and that he's aware. Well, whether he liked it or not, I can't imagine he liked it. But that Knicks as a whole were aware. I'm hoping that this kind of first rough season we see from RJ post contract is maybe what we saw from Julius last season.